Hey, YouTube. How is it going? I hope it's going better than my day. No, I've actually had a good day, but I had some trials and tribulations earlier today. We're going to try this again. I'm not going to give up this time. The first time I tried it just, I wasn't sure about things and I let it go. And then the second time my wife came in and she got upset with me because she didn't want to be, she just didn't want to be. Oh, sometimes you win and sometimes you just can't win. So, this here, as you can probably tell, I was going to talk about it and show it earlier. Some of you may have caught it. There's at least a couple of you that saw it anyway, but more or less this is just kind of a crap shot here on some branding and some merch and all that kind of crap, whatever. But the big thing that is going on more or less is I want to get your feedback on if I should run with my idea or what I need to change. Should I just quit altogether and stop while I'm ahead? That sort of thing. All that kind of stuff. Now, it's unfortunate that this came when it did. So the reason my last video and the one that I just released only a few minutes ago are so far behind in time. They should have been out on Wednesday and Thursday, kind of respectively. Maybe Thursday, Friday, respectively. But I didn't even get, my other video out until Friday, and it was kind of a bummer. Hey, how's it going there? I see somebody is joined in. I hope you're doing well. So this I was hoping would be here on Wednesday, Thursday. So I was planning on that. Well, it didn't show up, and the thing that I got was basically saying that I wasn't going to get it until Monday. So I kind of planned around that, which is kind of a bummer. So I waited a couple extra days to find out that I shouldn't have bothered waiting. Well, so then I just went ahead and did my videos. Well, I finished the last video that I just posted a few moments ago, and unfortunately, this came while I was doing that video. Kind of bums me out a little bit because I wasn't ready for it, and I was trying to loop everything all into one and all that fun stuff, and just sometimes you can't win, you know what I mean? So whatever, here we are now, and we're just going to do what we do. But yeah, I'm looking to go with legacy amplification. Friends and family are kind of pushing me to go with Luke amplification. There's a bug that's going to die in a few minutes if he doesn't get away from me. Sorry. And, Luke amplification or something along those lines. I'm leaning towards legacy. The challenge that I'm having is some of the pushback that I'm getting is that Steve Vai, of course, he has his legacy amplifier. I don't have an amp called Legacy. I'm shooting for a company named Legacy. Carvin, as far as I know, doesn't make it anymore. Nothing I make is anything in that realm. And, I kind of feel like I'm pretty safe. Like, there's really nothing I need to worry about. There's no other company that I know of called Legacy Amplification, and et cetera, right? Well, I don't know. Tell me what you think. Put it in the chat, or later on after this goes, to normal video mode or whatever, put your comments there. I really just kind of want to get an idea. So this is my first attempt at doing some merch. So we got handcrafted amps made for a Legacy. And then I got something on the back, of course, that I realized after making it that I kind of biffed it a little bit. So I got the logo on the back, and it says, when you look in the mirror, what you see is your legacy. I should have done this in a light gray color because that is the same color. Well, this is a light gray color here for this front side, and on the back, of course, I went with black. So I kind of biffed it on that. I didn't think about that when I was doing all the editing for this. But I only got a couple of these, so this is just kind of a little, what do you want to call it? Tester, if you will. So I don't know. At least I got a nice shirt I can wear. I like it. It's pretty comfy. This is the Glidden or Gildan or something like that. It better be anyway. Yeah, the Gildan. Soft style. I don't like these types of whatever. These kind of get scratchy and stuff, but you can rip them off. Whatever. So I did finish the build. As you probably have noticed, there's another video out that shows the completion of that. What I can tell you is that since that video was created this morning, and since I posted it just about a few minutes ago, I have already done some modifications to it, and I think I have wrapped it up. I do need to order a couple more parts. I need to get the correct resistor value that is this style of resistor here. This is the Ohmite, 1.7 series or whatever it is. I like these. These are really nice. I want to get a 10 watt to put in there. The one that's in there currently is a 5 watt. And it's also, what's the word for it? I just don't like it. It's a metal oxide. It's just not fun. Hold on, I got a text here from a good friend. Oh, way cool. So I have a buddy that's got a, what do you call it? One of those machines, like 3D printer. He's got a 3D printer. God, if I get the words out. This bug is going to kill me. There's a little fly in here. It's just buzzing around. Anyway, he made this stand to put up a couple of mounts, and he sent me a text of it. I can see we got another viewer in the chat. Go ahead and feel free to, put a chat out there. If you're new to this channel, if you're interested at all in what's going on, basically I build guitar amplifiers. And I build them from scratch, and I show you how they're done. All right? Makes sense? I hope it does. Should make sense. So I document all that, and then, of course, I post it up on YouTube here so you can kind of learn from it. That is the objective of this channel, is to try to empower you to build guitar amplifiers or get into your current model that you have and play around with it, or at least understand how it ticks. At the very least, that's the idea anyway. So beyond that, I see I lost one already. Yeah, I'm just not the channel for you. I'm not that interesting. This is what you're going to get. So you kind of have to be here because you want to be here. So it's just helpful if you interact with me. I mean, I have a couple topics to talk about, but, unless you're actually working with me here, there's really not much I can do for you. This particular stream today was meant more to bounce stuff off of you and hopefully get some sort of something or other. I wasn't anticipating or do not expect a bunch of patrons to come in, so it wasn't really for that purpose, really. It's just that, hey, we got Team YDNA first in the chat. What's going on, my man? John, good to hear from you. Wrong team, though. Although Andy did boot Team ATEC out of the chat the other day, I would say that I was a little miffed to say that he put you on pause, although he did only do it for a minute, but still. No love over here, I tell you. So, how you been, man? You doing well? Oh, I wish I was the GOAT. I'm not the GOAT yet. We're working on that. I can tell you right now, though, that build, I just released the video a few minutes ago, almost literally 20 minutes ago, or 10 minutes ago, excuse me. Yeah, no, it was about 20 minutes ago. But in either case, that thing is freaking amazeballs. I do not want to give it away now because it's exactly what I thought it was going to be and had met all of my criterion. So a little bit of backstory for those of you who are not initiated to this. John, I'm sorry, you already kind of know what I'm talking about here, but I built this amp called the Atlas a while back. Fucking bug. And it, Unity, man. Okay. Yeah, no, I know. I know he was just fudging with you, but, so I built this amp called the Atlas. And it was meant to be kind of like a a Fender Pro or a Fender Super amp. I can't remember which of the two it was. There's one of those ones that has 6L6s in it, and it has a cathodiene phase inverter. And then it has kind of their bog standard, front end for a Fender. I wanted to do something like that, but I wanted to do it just a little bit different. I wanted to put my front end in it, and I wanted to modify the output section a little bit to be a little more playful in terms of tube swapping and stuff like that, right? Well, I did it at first, and I couldn't gel with it. I wasn't happy with how it was coming out. I was dropping too much voltage with the higher output tubes to make it work with the higher output tubes. And then it had just a little too much voltage for the lower wattage tubes, like a 6V6. But at one point, I did basically convert it into a 5E3. And while it was in that state, it was absolutely glorious. It did all those things I wanted it to do. Had those nice glassy cleans, something that the Edge might be happy with. It did all that stuff. And then I could not allow myself to let it stay that way. It had to be an amp that was set up to go with large bottle tubes. I wanted at least the 30 watts out of it, or 28 watts or something like that. And I wanted it to be a little more versatile. So I took some notes about where it was when it was in that state to come back and go to something more dedicated to that later. That's where we're at right now with the 5E3 build. As far as the giveaway goes, initially it was hopefully going to be like a raffle. I kind of quickly realized that nobody gives a shit about me, and I'm not that popular. I don't claim to be, and I don't care to be. But I guess just to kind of build Cloud Atlas Steampunk build, we're going to work on that steampunk thing. My buddy, the one that gave me this computer that we're using today to do this stream, I don't know if you noticed, but the quality's back up a little bit again. We're running it in 1080 now. He hit me up and he's like, dude, when are we doing that steampunk build? He's got all kinds of crazy ideas. He's like, I want to do steam, I want to do bubbles, I want to do valves, I want to do this, I want to do that. He wants to help me and, drive some direction in it. And I'm like, hold on, bro. I don't even know what I'm going to do yet. But, so yeah, it came back around to building this 5E3. Decided I wasn't going to raffle it. Figured I would just do it as a giveaway to try to build some interest. I got at least a few people that are really interested. And I guess really the important part about it is that at least the people that are in the running for it and the ones that kind of have the biggest shot at it, Team YDNA there, only because you got the most points. So I'm going to kind of do something similar to what Andy's doing with his giveaway amp, except for instead of having to buy the raffle, you just get your name in the hat. And how it's going to work is I'll put all the names, I'll create some tickets, and everybody will have a certain number of points, and each point is a ticket. And I'll put all these tickets in there, and basically kind of a similar thing to what he's doing, the last one out kind of wins. I feel that is the fairest way to do it. Right now, Team YDNA here, aka Internet Money, aka Team A Tech, and also known as John. He's got 4 or 5 tickets now in there. I think you answered all the questions yesterday. I got to double check. I haven't had a chance to go through all that and tally everything up, but I mean, you're at least up to 4, 5, or 6 tickets by this point in time. I said that you were granted 3 off the get-go, so hold on, let's do that. Let's do that right. There he is. That one. You got 3. Anyway. So I was just playing that amp a few minutes ago, the 5E3. I did finish it. For those of you who just now kind of coming in, I already lost one of you, but whatever. It sounds freaking balls. Like, it's awesome. I did need to brighten it up a little bit. I could tell it was just a little too dark, darker than I wanted it to be when it was in its clean stage, or clean-ish mode, if you want to call it that. So I did a couple things to get it so it was brighter almost all the time, but also reel it in a little bit, and it really helped a lot. The distortion when it's wound all the way up is teats. It does that 5E3 kind of grit and growl and grind thing without getting all blatty and all the other fun stuff. I'm not going to play it today. We're going to do a whole expose on it here soon. Trust me. Trust you me, we will. I do need to order some more parts. I was saying that earlier. I need to get a 200 ohm, one of these guys here. I'm kind of repeating a few things, but since you're here and I'm not sure if you saw it, I will repeat it. I also need to get a different... I want to get a different bypass cap that I had. So I have a bunch of the SM grade stuff, which are just the cheap generic silver mica stuff. I really do like the Cornell Doubliers. They are a little bit more expensive. It's a real show now. They are a little bit more expensive, and I failed because I don't have my drink in front of me like I should. Hold on, let's resolve that problem. Hold on, bear with me. We've got our celebratory drink here today. We got Maker's Mark. I'm using my Crater Lake cup that I had from the other day. Okay, now it's official. This is a freaking show now. So, yeah. I was playing it. Sounds glorious. I want to get the CDM. The CDMs are a little bit harder to find, but they are much, much nicer. And they're just less prone to failure, I guess. Silver micas are great. They work with high frequency stuff. This is one of those things that you should be paying attention to, by the way. So Psionic Audio, this is where I learned this from, and I did some more research and I kind of went on with it. So silver mica is just like the creme de la creme when it comes to high frequency content. It's smoother, it does the thing just proper like, and it's super duper good for that kind of stuff. There's a problem with it though. They are more prone to failure, especially when you get anywhere kind of near their voltage max. So most of the ones that you buy that say SM on them are kind of at that 500 volt mark. And in some amps, you're really close to that voltage, right? So it's best to try to go like way and above and beyond. Now for the most of my amps, I do use a silver mica in the first stage as one of the primary coupling caps. But I'm using 1,000 volt rated stuff. There we go, my man. Yes. You know, I'm not going to argue with you. The Four Roses is definitely a step up from this, but I'm all out. So I can only be an alcoholic so much, right? I'm a good functioning one at the very least, but yeah. So today we're gonna enjoy the Maker's Mark, but yeah, it's so I use 1,000 watt rated one. It is a Zozo freaking cap, and it's a good cap. I haven't had any failures yet with them. And I haven't had any failures yet with any of the other ones that I use in my amps elsewhere. It's probably still a little early to tell for sure. I mean, some of these designs are only a couple years old at this point, with the exception of my prototype amp, which does have that setup in it. And in the 5 or 6 years that that thing's been running, I haven't had any issues with it whatsoever. In fact, it's still running the same tubes that I built it with, which is to say that it's quite happy, even 4 or 5 years now, no, coming up on 6 years later, and that thing has never seen a day in its life below 50%, just carang, like go go go. So let's take a sip to that. So yeah, since I got at least 2 or 3 of you here, what is your thought on Legacy? Do you prefer Legacy, Luke amplification? Do you like the logo? What do you, yay or nay? Just thumbs up, thumbs down, or anything else other than that? I got thick skin, and I guess you guys are off doing other stuff. So, I don't know. I'm happy with the logo. I'm pretty certain this is where we're going to go with it. I guess I don't have to use the same name as what my logo kind of represents, but at this point, I'm kind of more into the Legacy aspect of things. For those of you who maybe came in late and did not watch the front end of it, this is what the back says here. But I already had a little fudge up. So on the front, the writing that is small is in like a light gray color. And on the back, I went all black. And that's kind of a bummer because there's no continuation. So here's the problem with my full name. This is actually how I would write my L when I'm trying to be like careful and nice. So that actually is my signature. But when I usually write it out as a signature, like an actual signature, it looks more like a Z. So it comes up, shoots over and over. And I don't actually write my whole first name. It's literally just L, and then I put my G for my last name, and then I use this here to swoop, and another swoop, 2 dashes to make 2, and then I dot an I in there. So I end up with Luke Geist the second, right? Because I'm the second, not the first. I'm the second. So in that regard, that is actually my signature. Not that you can fake it in any way, but reminds me of the PV Classic series. Kinda, yeah, I guess. But it's the name of an amp, not the name of a series. I don't know. I might end up just having to go with Luke amplification or Lucas. Not Lucas. That's the problem. My name is not Lucas. It's actually Luke. Oh, I might get it. Oh, did I get him? Ah, I got that little fucker. Bug dead. Bug is dead. Hey, baby. No, I'm good. Thank you, though. You're gonna what now? You're gonna go get dinner? No, I'm good. Thank you, though. All right, I love you. That was the wife. She's in a much better mood now. Earlier when she came in, she's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I was like, "I'm on a thing." Are you live? I'm like, "Yeah." And then she kind of just stood there looking at me funny. And then I was like, why are you looking at me? And that pissed her off. You just can't win, you know? Sometimes you just can't win. So, all right. I guess to try to keep things a little bit interesting with you guys, because I know this isn't a lot of fun at the moment. There's not a whole lot of interaction right now. I need you guys to yip yap. Like, call me an asshole or something. I don't know. Pick something. I don't care. I'll be right back. I'm going to show something. All right. It is still warm. It is still warm. Hold on. Let me put my ears back in so I can hear things. So here it is, more or less in its completed state. At this point in time, I'm going to say it's complete. You can kind of see what I did right there. I'll put it up there so you can, maybe. So you can see that silver mica put there. And then, of course, this one there on the volume control. It's hard to see, but you know what I mean. It's there. That one is the right one. That one is going to stay. That one's complete. This one here, I'm going to have to take it back out and redo it because I want to get that brand there and put it there. So let's grab a pointer. I'm going to grab a pointer. This is going to be my pointer, even though it's not a really good pointer. Hold on. This is a much better pointer. All right, so let's just talk about this amp a little bit and how it, how it's different from like a 5E3 and what it is I think that makes this thing tick a little bit better. You haven't probably seen the other video yet because you're here now, and I literally just sent it out, released it like 20 minutes ago, 30 minutes ago or something like that. But the big thing about it is that I ended up with a little bit lower voltage than I wanted on my first B+ node. Not by a whole lot. We're talking like 10 volts. So I was in a margin of error anyway. What did you have again, or what do you have? Oh, this guy right here. So that is a ballast or a driver, if you will, for LED lighting. So for those of you who don't know what I'm about and stuff like that with my builds, it's meant to look as good as it sounds, right? It's got to have those two things. So the chassis that I build have lighting in them, and they have a mirror in the back. So when you look inside, you can see not only yourself, but you can see the backside of all the tubes, and it just makes it look cool. It gives it this ambience, and it's just something that no one else has done. So that's kind of what I do. But I use a light for the front faceplate, and it kind of helps provide that ambience inside the thing. And that is the driver for that. This thing's a little bit beefier than I need it to be, but the hope is that it never breaks. That is the idea anyway. So I went with a 275-0275. Yes, I do cabinet lighting. Basically this is furniture grade. What you're getting right here when whoever wins it, or if you were to buy one from me, this is furniture grade. Like, it is over-engineered. The cabinetry is beautiful. It's all handmade. Obviously, I use a CNC to cut it out, but it's all, hand put together and all that jazz, hand finished and stuff like that. I like to use the more pastel colors of Tolex. I built that purple hazel. You saw that one perhaps, but that's not a color I would normally use, although I'll do whatever color you want. But I like the teal, I like the baby blue, and other kind of pastel colors, and it just contrasts really well with the let's do it this way, with this gold color here. It just contrasts well with it. So I'm noticing something I don't like. We'll have to come back to that and see. There's some spots on this back piece here, and I'm not sure what it is caused by, but I haven't touched anything on it, so there's no reason why there should be any kind of spots there. But it's kind of all over, so I'm going to guess that they're not permanent, and I don't think they are. I just was able to smear one. Sorry, I got worried there for a second. Squirreled for a second. So yeah, a normal 5E3 has a 330/0330 power transformer in it, which is pretty beefy. That's a lot of voltage, right? But the way they get away with it to make it work for 6V6s is that they use a 5U4, which drops like 60 volts off of the HT rail. It's a squishy rectifier tube. It's not my favorite rectifier tube by any means. I like the GZ34s. They're pretty much like using silicone diode, except for they're not. So I went with the 275-0275, which means I have less voltage on my B plus rail, but I'm using a GZ34, which drops maybe 10 volts at the most. And at this point here, I had exactly what I was shooting for without any load on it, which was about 386. And that's what I assumed I would end up with, is about 386 volts at that point there. And I was shooting for 250 volts here after it was loaded. So needless to say, after everything was in here and it was biased up to where it needed to be, I ended up at about 342 or something like that volts there. So I missed it by about 8 volts total from what I was. I haven't seen his videos yet. I need to check him out. But thank you for pointing that out. I will definitely go check his channel out, or his videos at least, at the very least. And I was about spot on with my guesstimation with this guy here and this guy here. So over here, if I had exactly what I was shooting for there, I would have had exactly what I was shooting for here. So I was shooting for 250 loaded. I ended up at like 244 or something like that. So I was so close to being right on the money. But 8 to 10 volts is not that big a deal. I mean, that's within spec for sure. So I ran with it. We're not going to change anything there. It is interesting because I did end up with a slightly lower than is typical, as I normally do anyway. That's kind of my thing anyway. I kind of knew I would though, but I ended up with 320 volts from plate to cathode on these 6V6s here. So these are running very conservatively. 320 volts, I mean 350 is kind of, I would say, par for the course. So we're at 322. We are, down there a little bit. And I think I was able to kind of show and quantify a little bit about my idea about how the cathode current being a factor in things. So I made the guesstimation that I was going to need a 200 ohm bias resistor to get this thing to bias up. Now imagine that. I have lower voltage, but I ended up going with a lower cathode resistor or bias resistor to get the same kind of bias, if you will. Now I biased this thing. It ended up right at 95%. But most people do the lazy way, where in a cathode bias amp like this, they'll just measure the voltage drop over the top of this guy, this being the bias resistor, of course, and they will calculate that out, and if it's under the whatever the wattage of the tubes are, they call it good and off to the races. The problem is that when you take that voltage drop there and do your bias calc over this resistor and do it only that way, it includes the screen current. Now, the screen current is separate from the plate dissipation, all right? So just because the current's flowing through your cathode doesn't mean that everything's dissipating out of the plate itself. So you think, like, I have 100% of dissipation according to this this measurement here, right? The problem is that the screen grid is stealing quite a bit of that, or enough of it anyway, to be a factor. 2 to 5% is probably a safe number. And that means that if you were at 100%, that means you're maybe closer to 95%, right? And it worked out exactly that way. So when we did the math on it, this came out to 99.3% of dissipation through the cathode, just doing it the lazy way. But then we did the output resistance method or whatever, or output transformer resistance method, which I feel is the best way, because that is the only way that you actually know what is dissipating through the plate of that tube, right? That's the idea behind it, is to get the actual dissipation from the plate of that tube. Well, we did that, and we ended up right at 95%. So our max safe range was 43 milliamps per tube, and we ended up right about 41. Hey, what's going on, Riley? Thank you for coming in and saying hello. I appreciate that. This is actually starting to turn into a show. I love it. So we got 5 of you now. That's awesome. That's cool. I got the ones that I care about here, and that's all that matters. So yeah, I think that kind of helped quantify what I was talking about introducing cathode current into the equation, because nothing else really changed. I lowered the voltage even. But lowering the voltage allows you to run more cathode current. And because I needed more cathode current, I ended up going with a lower value resistor to allow more current to flow, right? To heat up the bias, basically. And we were able to kind of see that happen out in real world. The screen grid voltage is a place that you can play with that. So let's say I wanted to get, without changing this resistor here, let's say I wanted to get it into an even more conservative number. Well, what you could do is take this guy and raise it a little bit. So I was at 4.7K with this one. We could have gone up to 5K. Hey, what's up, Short Circuit? We could have gone up to 5K, or we could have gone up to like 6.8K or something like that, and that would drop the screen that much more, right? It would drop it a little bit more, and the further away the screen grid is away from the plate voltage, the less the less dissipation you're going to end up with, is the way to put it, right? Whereas the closer the screen grid is to the plate voltage, the more electrons it will allow to flow. I do sound thirsty. Wizard, you know the game, my man. Thank you. You're probably tired of hearing me breathing on all the time. So yummy. So thank you guys for coming in. I appreciate that. Ooh, yeah. Congrats, man. Hosting a grad party. Is it your kid that's graduated, or yourself, or your friend, college, high school, etc., etc.? I'd be interested. I used to do a lot more of those kind of parties, not hosting them, but just being a part of them, I guess you could say. You don't have to date yourself if you don't want to either. I'm not trying to out you or anything, you know what I mean? So yeah, that is a way that you could play with that without having to deal with this resistor. So, I mean, one way or another, you're changing one, but it also does change the way that the amp feels and kind of works. So one of those other things that you could probably kind of take note of right now is the screen grid itself. The larger the disparity in voltage between the plate and the screen grid, the more kind of compression and like it's like a feel kind of thing more than anything. It does control the amount of, electron flow through the power tube, but you still can get the same amount of power. It's just it kind of changes how it gets there. But the larger the voltage difference between the two, the more kind of compressed and like almost like I'm trying to think of the word where it's like stunted. You know what I mean? It just kind of feels like it's choked up or something like that. It's kind of hard to say or quantify it in a verbal sense, I guess, but it's more of a feel thing, I guess. Now, whereas you go the other way, you've heard of tying the screen grid basically directly to the plate voltage, which is basically running a tube in triode mode. And now, in that case, you actually do lose some output power, but it does change how it reacts. It acts more like a normal triode tube would, but it just changes the way it feels. It's obviously got more of that thing that it has to it, right? But pentodes are nice because of how they work. They're just a little more efficient. So that's why they work really well as power tubes, right? Makes sense. That's why the EF86 or whatnot that you hear that's used as a preamp tube, it's actually a pentode. And the 6SJ7 or whatever, or is it the 6SL7? I can't remember. There's so many of those ones, but another one of those is a pentode, and they just slam a lot more power through them. The mu is higher. So it's a stupid word, MU. It's mu. Mu is the efficiency of the tube to convert X voltage into X output, more or less. Usually the lower the mu, the less voltage output it has, but the more current swing that it'll provide. So again, you're trading voltage for current. So that's why the 12AU7 is used where it's used at, usually in the phase inverter. Really good at throwing current down the line, further on down the way, and not so great at pushing voltage down the line. But it handles, impedance stuff really, really well. So moving on from there, I decided to go with an 18K here. Now, in the original 5E3, it has a 22K if I'm not mistaken. So I got about a 5K difference right there. But whatever. I kind of knew that it was going to give me just a little bit more voltage at the phase inverter, which I was okay with. That just means it'll guarantee that I have just a little more snot to push into the power tubes. And I can actually get some power tube distortion out of this amp, which is nice. But then I went with a 10K here, and you think now 18 plus 10 is 28. How do you maintain that voltage further down the line? Well, the beautiful thing is that that's seeing both tubes worth of current flow through it, so it's going to drop what it drops. This one here only has one tube worth of current flowing through it, so it actually retains a little bit more of the voltage. And I've talked about it in another video. There's calculators for this, but when you do this enough, you kind of have an idea of what's going to work, right? So I was about spot on with this one here to get the voltage that I wanted there. Now I could probably go with an 8K there and actually get the 250 volts, but this thing sounds stellar right where it's at. So we're not going to change that. Not one bit. If I know some of you haven't had a chance yet to watch the video, and some of you are going to go back to watch it later. What I can tell you is that this is a little bit darker than I wanted it to be. Whatever, I kind of knew it was going to be dark a little bit, right? We're using lower voltage after all. So I did end up putting this guy right here, which is a treble bleed cap over the top of the volume control. And at lower volume settings, it just allows more highs to flow through there. Are you using typical Fender 1.5? No, I am not. I'm using 6.8Ks. Technically, you should be using 10Ks for 6v6s, but I wanted to give myself some room because 6v6s can be, not always, can be a little more sensitive to ringing and oscillations at their inputs or their grids. So I wanted to leave it so that if I had to, I could put a 1.5K directly on the grid of the tube. I didn't want to eliminate these. I wanted to make these more interchangeable if I needed to. But I erred a little on the high side, knowing that if I did have to add one directly to the pin of the tube, that I could put a 1.5 and it would just about add up to right around 10K, right? 6.8 plus 1.5. I mean, it's close enough to 10K to call it 10K. So that was the idea with that there. I don't think I'm going to need it. It seems to be working pretty well, but honest to God, 10K, most amp companies, I'm telling you right now, most amp companies are not using a high enough value grid stopper for their output section. And the reason they're not is because they're generally pushing their luck with the grid leaks. In order to get the amount of volume that they get out of these things the way that they do, they usually run slightly higher than is ideal for the grid leaks. In which case that means that you have no room left for putting in a grid stopper. And I think it's just one of those things where it was like, we got a 1.5K, just throw it in there. And it just turned into one of those things that they all, most of the amplifiers out there now are just copy and paste. Like there's no engineering going on. It's like, oh, Fender did it, Marshall did it, Vox is doing it, Watkins Dominator did it, etc. All of them, they just did it. So we're going to do it too, even without thinking about what it actually should be. And maybe it's just because I don't know. It's tough to say. I can't get into the minds of everybody. I just know that based on my experience, the grid leaks grid stoppers should be higher in value than they are. And the grid leaks should generally be lower than they are. Another downside, though, I can get why they did what they did. Now, I used 0.1s for the coupling caps going into the power tubes here. That is a little large for it's a little large, right? It can get a little woolly if you really start getting the output section to work. Now, I think in the past when they were actually using the proper values, so let's say I used 100K here, right? If I used 100K and a 0.1, you might actually start to notice a little bit of a bass drop, but you also lose a little bit of gain going into the power tubes, which means that they're not going to be as likely to get into distortion, which I think is a big part of what makes a guitar amp at least kind of do what it does. So I can understand why they went with larger values for the grid leaks. But using larger values on the grid leaks also allows them to use smaller values for the coupling caps. So the JCM 800 is kind of a good example just all around for most of this stuff. I think at one point in time there was a version of the amp that did use 0.1s, and it also had, I think, 150 Ks or something like that. But then they went to 220 Ks and a 100-watt amp, which is at the very, very edge. But they ended up going with 0.022s to keep out of blocking distortion. So the larger you go with these guys here, the more prone you are to get blocking distortion. And what it is because once you get that thing charged up with larger grid leaks, you get yourself into trouble. Because as you start sending the beans to this thing, it's going to get pissy. Can get pissy. Probably will. Especially in an amp that just, is meant to get turned up like that. Now this one here, I don't think you're going to want to dime it. It's not that it's that loud. I still think this thing's going to be right around the 12 to 18 watt range, at least somewhere in there. I haven't done the voltage check yet to see what we're actually putting out, but based on my math, this thing should be at least right around 15 watts or something like that. But this is a spot that you can play with. Grid leak wise, the smaller you go, the larger you need to go with your coupling cap. That's really all the math works out to. If you go smaller with your grid leak, you're going to go bigger with your coupling cap. That's about it. And I didn't have to get crazy elsewhere in the amp. I used a pretty much standard, 1 meg for the volume control, which is kind of possibly pushing your luck in an amp like this. I mean, I've got a parallel triode pushing into, the basic 5E3 section here. So it does add a little bit more gain than a single triode would. Imagine just taking both channels of a normal 5E3, coupling them together, and slamming it into the next gain stage. Well, that's essentially what we've done with what I've got here, except for it'll be much, much quieter. And I think it just changes the way it feels and sounds a little bit. This thing does a glorious clean. And when it's clean, I mean it's freaking clean. Edge of breakup is still going to be a problem with this amp. It's a 5E3 and it does what the 5E3 does. I don't think I'm going to be able to smooth it out the way I want it. So this is either going to be a nice clean amp or you're going to dime it all the way up. That's pretty much what it's going to be. But when you do dime it up all the way, it sounds pretty nice, especially with the higher output pickups and or humbuckers. It's time for another drink. Let's go. Any questions, anybody? I know I'm just kind of rambling on here, but I kind of figured I would do kind of like a little history class without actually going into history, but you know what I mean? Just kind of like a little course identifier, if you will. So let's talk a little bit about my parallel triode thing, I guess, because I've been getting questions about it. Some people are kind of intrigued by it. It's not common, but it's not uncommon either. It's definitely not a vintage thing, which is to say that you're not going to see it in amps like the Gibson GA series or Fenders or this, that, or that. It's just not something that was done in those types of amps. I want to say the first time I knew of it or heard of it was in a Matchless, which is a Mark Sampson kind of thing, right? Or a Philip Joyce. I can't remember the other gentleman's name off the top of my head. I apologize. But Harry Joyce, no, is that Matchless? No, excuse me, Hiwatt. I can't remember. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Matchless is where I first saw it, where they did this parallel triode thing. I was always kind of like, oh, that's smart. It just makes sense to me because you're not wasting a triode out of that tube, right? And then there's another company called Mojave Ampworks. They're defunct now at this point, but they used to be pretty popular at one point in time. I'm kind of shocked that they did close down because they had some really cool designs. I would say that they were more contemporary, so they kind of stuck in this vein here where, they took the amp du jour that everybody would normally get, JTM 45, JCM 800, etc., and then they kind of did a variation of it. Not unlike this here, and not unlike most any other amp companies out there. There's only, a dozen different amplifiers to copy, more or less, right? So in either case, each of us kind of have our own little way of doing this. Some will run them into more conventional tone stacks. Mark Sampson of Matchless fame did something where he did like the like a low kind of frequency thing, and then a mid, and then he would run it into a gain stage, and then you do the high frequency after that, right? That's like the Matchless Chieftain. There's a couple other amps that kind of have something similar to that. The Clubman kind of has this sort of thing going on with it as well. Where myself, I didn't include the high frequency portion of it in the circuit, and I do it slightly different with the bass cut, if you want to call it a bass cut, right? More or less what I do is I take two caps and I run them in parallel, and the low cut varies how much the big cap blends with the little cap, right? And when you take two caps and run them in parallel, they add up in value. So whatever the largest cap is, it will add that plus whatever the other cap is in value. So in this case here, I've got a 500 PF and then a 0.022. That's simple, nothing crazy, right? Nothing, it's not that fancy. It's pretty elegant when you think about it because it's very simple. And then all I'm using is a 2 meg pot to blend this guy over the top of this guy. And they go into the volume control just like normal. This guy here, this little treble bleed cap thing that you see there, there's nothing fancy about that. That's in 99.99% of amps out there. The only thing that differs between one and another is generally the size of it. When I say size, I mean the value, like 100 PF, 200 PF, 500 PF, or whatever. I don't like using super high values. It's, how do you explain it? The higher the value, the more highs that come over, but there's like a way to calculate the knee, right? The knee is the frequency at which it starts to eke over, and they call that the corner frequency, right? So the higher it is, the higher that corner frequency will be, and the lower the value of it, the higher the corner frequency will be, and the higher the number that is, the lower the corner frequency will be. So 100 PF would be here, 500 PF would be here, right? So more mids and stuff like that would get through. In either case, I use it as a way to just get the highs, literally the high frequency content, to get into the signal to make up for what you would lose by having the volume control there. So as you roll down the volume control, it's dragging this down, right? It's loading up that first stage, which causes it to darken up a little bit. And it gets darker than you probably would want it to. So that's why they put that there. So when you're at really low volume settings on the gain pot, it just allows the high frequencies to get through, yada, yada, yada. I kind of use it as a way, like another form of a tone control. So I design the amps to basically be dimed all the way up, right? So all the knobs at 11. And you get kind of what you get, right? If it sounds good that way, there's no reason why it shouldn't sound good when it's quieter, right? So I try to give it a little bit more bass than it probably would need, so you would end up having to roll the lows back just a little bit. And I try to get the highs right about where it's just too bright. I don't want it to be too dark, but I don't want it to be too bright. And that allows you to then roll it back with the high cut, control, right? All right. Well, then how do you deal with the mids? In an amp like this where there is no mid control, and I don't usually have a mid control, there are a couple ways to do that. One of those ways is with that guy right there. So at lower gain settings, you're letting more highs go through. The lows do what they do, which means you got this area in the mids that are kind of untouched. So if you roll back the bass, you can kind of get some of the bass out of the mix, and the mids will kind of hang there, and the highs will kind of stay there. But as you dime things up, there is a way to actually get some of the mids to kind of settle in. And that's what this little circuit right here is doing. So you can kind of see it there. I've got that little network going on right here. So that is a grid stopper with a treble bleed cap over the top of it, right? You've seen it in a million amplifiers, the JCM 800, etc., right? What this guy here does is it's not like a volume control, but it slows down the current flow. or the flow of electrons going into the next gain stage, and it stops grid blocking. It prevents grid blocking, more or less. It does change how the amp kind of sounds a little bit. The higher that value is, generally the darker it is, because it interacts with the Miller capacitance of the tube, or the next stage, right? So the higher that is, generally the darker that stage will end up being. But you can get it from going into blocking distortion. Blocking distortion sounds like doo-doo. You don't want it. Well, a way to get some of that brightness back is to put a little treble peaking cap around the top of it, which will allow the high frequencies to climb on over. Depending on the value that you use and the size of the treble peaking cap that you use, you can get like this balance of highs to lows. But it'll help kind of suck the mids out a little bit. So you remember earlier I said I try to have a little bit more bass than I need and keep the highs under control. Well, that's kind of where the mid control is in these amps. It's really done with that network. If you want to have a more scoopy kind of sound, you turn up the bass. This here limits the mids, and that allows the highs to suck over the, flow over the top, which makes it kind of sound a little scoopy. That's all. That's how I do it. So because this is always in circuit, it's never out of circuit, which means it's kind of like a fixed, mid-cut control in a way. If you go with a smaller value here, so a smaller resistor, you need to go with a larger value for the treble bleed cap to get the same kind of effect. Obviously, there's kind of a pretty small window, and it's not like hyper effective, let's say. It's not like it's an actual mid scoop, but it gives it that kind of feel and the kind of effect. So for those of you who are interested in how you can utilize that circuitry to tame the mids a little bit, that is kind of a way to do it. Any questions while I take a sip of my Maker's Mark here? Well, we're 52 minutes into this. It's a lot longer than I thought we were going to go. Since I'm not getting kind of the interaction that I thought I was going to get, and I haven't gotten the answers I was looking for. Oh, there we go. Finally, John for the win there. Another point for John, right? So I am not going to provide this as a combo amp. By the way, it's just going to be the head, just in case you didn't already know. I have a Creamback. I believe it's the Creamback 65. I'm pretty sure it's the Creamback, whatever the normal average one is. So for test speakers, I use them all. So this one here is a 500. I went with a 500, and then this is a 470 here. So it's pretty much a standard value for most amps. Except for in this case here, it does it just right for this amp, I think. It's got a nice mid-range punch to it, but it's still kind of muted a little bit. And then in combination with the lows and the highs, it's balanced, I would say. I generally tend to err to balanced. I wish. Thank you for the trophy. I appreciate that. So I use all of my speakers to test this thing. So I have T75s, the G12 T75s. Everybody hates them. I like them. They're not that bad. They're a little sterile sounding, but they're pretty neutral to me, or at least in the cab that I have, they're pretty linear, I'd say. Flat is what I mean. I have a G12M in another cabinet back there. I also run it through that. I run it through another cabinet that's a 2x12 that has the G12H's. The 30th anniversary versions or whatever. It's not the what do you call it? It's not the vintage 30s, but it's the heritage, whatever they are. But they're 30 watters as well. The G12H's, they're in just about all the matchless amps and stuff like that. A lot of boutique amps use them. And then I got the Creambacks, and I'm pretty sure they're the 65s. And I run it through each one, and I can tell you right now, this amp kind of prefers the G12H's, if you will. Although it sounds pretty good just with any of the speakers, it's a little what's the word for it? Maybe some people would like it, but with the Creamback, it has this nice mid-range honk to it that some people might like. It's like a low mid, like a really woody kind of honk. It's cool, but it's kind of muted in the upper mids, and so it kind of loses some of its apparentness in the mix, I would say. I'll try to expose that maybe if I can, but it's challenging. So I know a lot of these YouTube like reviewers, if you will, like they're trying to make it look good and sound good, right? So they will do the stuff that they do to make it sound good. Lord knows what kind of processing they use, this, that, and the other. Lord knows exactly what they did, right? Generally, they sound pretty good. And then you've got a few others that say we haven't no post-processing. We just stuck an SM57 up to it, this, that, and the other, and this is what you hear. The problem is that I have never just stuffed an SM57 up to a speaker and called it a day. Like, it's going to get some amount of low roll-off, applied to it, because there's almost always more low end than you need. Generally speaking, it's a little too bright oftentimes when it's right on the dust cap or whatever. So I try to generally split between the dust cap and, where the glue is. So literally I split kind of right in the middle there, right? Generally that kind of gets the nice balance. And then if it's still too bright, I'll just move it over closer to the edge of the speaker, right? Well, the problem is every time I move that mic, it's going to be in a different position, right? So every band that comes off, or up, I should say, is always going to have something different than the last one, even if they all had the same exact speaker in the cabinet that they were using. So it's almost not fair to just say I stuck an SM57 in front of this thing and this is the sound that it is, because you can move that mic around forward, back, left, and right, three-dimensional space, to get it to sound actually pretty good. If the speaker sounds good in the room, there's a way to mic it to make it sound good, period. So you're not really just stuffing the mic in front of it and calling it a day. Like there's still a way to process the sound in a way, I guess is what I'm saying. And it's generally by mic placement. In a live situation, I'm a live sound engineer. Generally, you put the mic right up to the grill, right? I then will pull it back maybe an inch, maybe 2 inches, because I like a little bit of air. But realistically, you need to be off like about 6 inches to a foot thereabouts to really kind of get any kind of neutral territory and try to get some of the proximity effect away. Getting the proximity effect out is helpful because it gets rid of some of that woof and some of the bass frequencies, which tightens it up, makes it sound a little bit cleaner. Which is why I don't like amps that sound too thin, because then you end up having to stuff the mic in there to take advantage of proximity effect. So, excuse me. It is a real show now. So yeah, there's just 1,000,001 ways to mic a cabinet, and you can greatly affect the way the amp sounds by where you place it. And I don't think you can make any amp sound bad. You can always move the mic to make it sound right. Would love to know your thoughts on a cathodiene phase inverter versus a long tail pair. Oh, joy. So a cathodiene phase inverter has no gain, right? So it's unity gain. So what goes into it is what comes out of it, okay? That's all that means. So it's slightly less than 1 actually. So if you got +1 going in, you get, plus 0.9 going out, right? Something like that. So it's not really good at driving tubes further on down the line into distortion, especially in larger output tube amps that require a good amount of voltage and or current to drive them into distortion. So from a clean aspect, highly linear. So by linear, I mean very, very flat. And exacting, if you will. So in a hi-fi setting where your distortion is not the name of the game, I would say cathodiene phase inverter is great. It's excellent in that regard. It's got an extremely high input impedance, so it cannot be loaded down by the previous or the stage in front of it, or the stage in front of it cannot be loaded down by it, I should say. You can use a 1 meg grid stopper and it doesn't even change it. Like it doesn't even think about the fact that it's there. So it's perfect for that kind of stuff there. But because it lacks the amount of drive required to get several high wattage tubes going anywhere, that's where it starts to fall apart, because invariably you're going to cause that thing to go into distortion. And the distortion that they create, cathodic phase inverters that is pretty yucky. A lot of people don't like it, and that's kind of what the allure is to a 5E3. It's one of the more popular amps that has that style of phase inverter in it, and it just does that thing. And you either like it or you don't. It's really a cool thing. This amp has a completely different sound from all of my other ones, and a lot of it has to do, obviously, because of the phase inverter. Now, a long tail pair does have voltage gain, so it's essentially just another gain stage, right? You're just taking two triodes and placing it so they're out of phase with each other and sending a signal in that's in the same phase. It just happens that there's multiple inputs, right? So forgetting about the inputs, a long tail pair is literally just two triodes that do what triodes do, and they go into the output. They just happen to be out of phase with each other. So they combine and work in a normal push-pull amplifier. That's it. So what that means, though, is that they more or less distort like a normal tube would, or a normal triode would, I should say. Very easy to set up and easy to work with. They use a shared cathode bias kind of setup in them, so you can warm it up and cool it down just like you normally would with any other type of triode setup. There are other things to them there's other things to them because no two triodes are identical. Balance can sometimes be an issue, and we do rely on CMR, which is common mode rejection, for the phase inverter to deal with noise and to also drive our tubes as equally as we can. We don't want one up here and one down here, right? We want them to be very, very close to even with each other, objectively. Well, the only way to really balance a long tail pair and maintain balance is to use a larger tail resistor. The tail resistor is the one that's in the bottom of most of them. So you've got the one that connects directly to the cathodes, and then you got this other one that's usually on this end of the circuit board down here that is the tail resistor. That tail resistor is what kind of varies how much, what's the word for it? Emphasis is applied to the phase inverter versus the output tubes. The lower the tail resistance, the more emphasis that the phase inverter will put onto the output tubes. That's to say, they'll drive more output into the output tubes at the cost of balance. That's to say that they won't be as equally balanced in terms of their output. That's why they use two different values for the plate resistors on them as well, to try to balance their outputs. Now, as you go larger in value with that tail resistor, it puts the emphasis more on the phase inverter. So that means the phase inverter will start to do more of the work as opposed to the output section, which will cause the phase inverter to go into distortion more or sooner, right? But its upside is that it has a better balance. That is to say that CMR is working in your favor more. There's other little things. I mean, obviously, you can play with the cap values. You can use different values for either side. You can play with the grid leaks that come off of each of the grids that tie into the center point there. Generally, it's 1 meg. 1 meg will have more bass. But if, let's say, you have too much bass, you can play with that value and go down to 470K. I believe there is a Friedman amp out there that actually uses two different values. I believe they use like a 470 on one side and like a 220 on the other, or something like that. And you can use different values. Obviously, you could you can play with that. The tail resistor, I'd say, is the easiest to play with and get kind of this, tilt function, if you will. So again, smaller, meaning it tilts towards the output section, and higher, tilting towards the phase inverter, doing more of the work, right? So there's all kinds of different things. A cathodic phase inverter, going back to that in terms of like the plate value and the cathode value that you have, it pretty much doesn't matter. It's going to sit in the middle either way. There is an ideal spot, and pretty much what Fender did is close enough to perfect to be fine. As long as they're the same value, they tend to just land right in the middle. It's going to self-regulate, and it's extremely linear. Because it's only one tube, it's not relying on two separate elements or devices to do the job. So it's going to do what it does. It has a very high level of negative feedback going on with it due to the cathode setup of it. So it linearizes itself really, really well. So cathode ion phase inverters are not nearly as bad as people make them out to be. It's just that when they go into distortion, they have a sound. That's it. That's it. So I hope that answers your question en masse. I'm down for a couple more. We've breached the 1 hour mark. I'd still like to hear your thoughts on what I should name this company. I'm still leaning towards Legacy. For those of you who are late to the party, this is what we're working with here. Handcrafted amps made for a Legacy. And then we have the backside. So if you look in the mirror, what you see is your Legacy. So I do have a mirror in my amplifiers. I don't know if you know that. I guess you wouldn't, because most of you haven't really seen probably all of my work. I have a couple ones that show them, but yeah. In either case, a little bit more about the competition, if you want to call it, for this guy here. In the other video that I just posted, I did kind of clarify a couple other things. One is that obviously you need to be subscribed to my channel, and if you're not, you should be, because you should be. I did not provide any tests in the last video, so don't worry about that. You're not missing anything. There is no tests in this video either. In the next one, I will kind of apply some more call to actions, if you will. In the next video, it's going to be another week probably before I get another video out, but tomorrow I am going to buy some wood, and the wood is going to be used to start making the cabinetry for this thing. I'm going to try to sink that one down into like 2, maybe 3 videos at most. I think we're on part 5 today of this build. Obviously, this is the part that everybody cares about. But I do need to do a sound sample of this thing, which I will do soon, hopefully. Probably not this week, though, because I do need to get doing some more engineering work on the for the CNC side of things to get the cabinet for this done. So wood is good. Damn straight. I have a couple things I got to figure out. One of my big things is that because I use a mirror in the back, I have to use a full-size 3/4 inch sheet. It's best if the cabinet is either really, really rigid, or that the back panel itself is integral to the rest of the amp to make sure that it doesn't warp and move and all that other fun stuff. So the challenge I'm having is that how do you get an amp box? I don't want to do the pillars on the side anymore. I want to do it where it's more on either side of this thing and get the chassis or the cabinet width into about 18, 19 inches or something like that. That's what the goal is. Well, how do you get a back panel into this without having screws that go into the side? Because I don't want to have screws that go into the side. I don't like external screws, and I don't like external things. Like, I don't want you to know how this thing is put together. It's got to be a trade secret. So I make my engineering job really, really difficult. I don't make it easy on myself. The last cabinet I did for the purple hazel, that thing just about broke me. Just the amount of math and stuff, like even for something as simple as a freaking box, it was just nuts because everything had to fit exact in order to make that work. So I'm trying to find a way to simplify it a little bit so it doesn't have to be as exacting. But the challenge I'm having now is how the hell do I Tolex the back channel or back panel? Or how do I make it so it's all wood without running into the problem of how I Tolex things and how I finish all the rest of the parts? So I got to figure that out. So that is next on my agenda. You guys, I love you all so much. I genuinely do appreciate all your attention and support and, just everything. I really do. I really do. I am blown away. I think I've just surpassed like 2,300 something subscribers. Baffles my freaking mind. Oops, say it, don't spray it. Baffles my freaking mind. So all I can say is thank you guys. whoever wins this guy is going to be super freaking stoked. No joke, this thing is turning out to be one of my more favorite amplifiers just because it's working so well right out of the gate. Like, it literally took 2 components to change, or add, I should say, and it brought it from here to there. You keep making hype videos. I did address that guy in the that forum. Oh, yeah, no worries, dude. That guitar guy, I appreciate it for coming in here and just listening to me yip yap and asking questions. I'm happy to help. I did address that guy that asked the question of, am I going to wear my ring? Yes, I'm going to wear my ring. Nothing in here is going to kill me. There's just nothing to worry about. So, in either case, you guys, I will see you on the next one. You take care. Goodbye.